After going through and working with that form sign in CSS and sort of making it our own, I still felt kind of dissatisfied by the end results. It sort of irritated some things with the programmer in me. The primary thing being that we're repeating a lot of things over and over again. So form sign-in, we want everything to be a child of that, and so we repeat it at the beginning of this stuff over and over again. We also have numbers that are kind of embedded in here that get used more than once. Notice margin bottom -16 happens right here in order to make something touch on the bottom. And then we're applying margin bottom 10 pixels in a couple different places. So having repeated values like that, it doesn't make it as maintainable. We sort of need to exist in just one location. There really isn't much what we can do with plain CSS to fix that, but we could use Sass to fix it. This is something that we learned, but we never really went any further with. And so I feel compelled here, when we have an opportunity to play with it, to do just that. I have updated the base project so that you are now able to actually write and compile Sass as you work with it. You may notice there's a new folder called SCSS, and underneath that is a file called sasstile.scss. This file, every time we save it, will get automatically picked up by Grunt and compiled to CSS. It will show up in the file sasstyle.css. And right now, it's just doing the default margin top 40 pixel on our body there. Let's go ahead and take what we just wrote into index.css, bring it over into sasstyle.css, and get that working to our advantage. I'm going to save this. And now if we go and look at sasstyle.css, you'll notice it pulled it all over. It's really not changing anything right now because it is just plain old CSS. So it doesn't do anything yet, but we can start taking advantage of our Sass now. So what are some things that we could do over here? The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change all of these comments because Sass supports the one-line comment. Background gray, and leave room for nav bars. And if I do put my comments in like that, then when it gets compiled, those comments will get taken away, which is kind of what I prefer. I don't want the compiled version to have comments in it. So make form narrow and pad. And then we have some other things that we're doing here. So here's where now we can start taking advantage of Sass. The first thing I'd like to be able to do here is get rid of this form sign-in being repeated everywhere. We can actually do that because we're allowed to embed things when we do them in Sass. And so we can indicate that I want everything to be under form sign-in here by simply leaving that rule open while we define other rules. And so all these other ones here don't need form sign-in anymore. So let's get rid of it. Form sign-in space. We're going to need to do it one by one because I don't want to get rid of all of them. So replace. And then it's back around to that one, and that is the one I want to keep. And then for all of these, we can tab them in a little bit. The last one we didn't have inside of that. And then close it out like this. And so now form sign-in, everything that's inside of here has to be part of that. And if I save this and go look at Sass style, you'll notice now it's automatically putting that form sign-in in for me. It's translating back to CSS. It's a small change, but it's one that just feels right because now I've basically said all of this should only happen to things that are inside of form sign-in, which was what I wanted. Small change, but an important one conceptually. We could also then use some variables to our advantage. So let's create a variable negative padding and set it equal to -16px, like that. And actually, the negative padding ends up being 15px. Let's just call it 15px. We do a little math to make it cooler than that. Uh-oh, what did we get wrong here? Expected. Oh, yes. I always do this wrong. Remember, it's not an equal sign. It is a colon. I always do that wrong. So when we're defining a variable there, we still use colon instead of equals. Good. I'm glad it got my attention on that. Let's get back over here, bring our form up. There it is. So now, let's see what else we can do with that. Basically, this happens in two places. Right here, I want to say negative $form padding plus one more. We want to go one further than the usual form padding. And that makes this a slightly more versatile setup. Let's see, did I do that right? Oh, I called it negative padding. Let's do that and fix that. You can see it screaming at me back there, so I know something's wrong. There we go. Now we can do this again. Let's bring it down here. We do the same thing when we have them touch both. And now this value that was used twice can be changed in the same place, right up here. Now one last thing I want to consider using here would be something that allows me to work with border box a little bit better. So I'd like to be able to apply these vendor prefixes a little more automatically. For that, we can create sort of CS or Sass's version of a function. They call this a mix-in. And this is one that I found over here, this somebody's snippet. I found this one that I thought was actually a pretty simple one that we can work with. So this is going to look like a function. I'm going to define it up at the top. And he calls it cross-browser. That's a great thing. So basically it takes any property and it applies all of those prefixes to it and then also puts it in by itself. Now, remember here, let's take a look at exactly how this is doing. All of these are going to be replaced with whatever the value is here. And then the property is going to get copied out like this. But remember, you have to do this syntax when it goes right in the middle of something like a property. So you have to do hashtag curly brace and then the variable in order for it to actually get evaluated correctly. So now, in order to actually use this, all we have to do is include it down here. So we can say @include cross browser, and notice it marks it as a mix-in. And our property is called box sizing, and the value is border box. You just type them in right like that. And then I can delete all of these, and there's just one line here. Basically it says, set box sizing to border box, but do it in a cross-browser kind of way. If we save this, then we can come back over here to sassstyle.css and see it's done exactly what I asked it to right there. So here we're getting a little bit more programmer-like with our CSS. I find this to be much more satisfying, much more conceptually solid, and I would imagine that this would be much more reusable moving forward. It allows you to customize things much easier. It just all around is more maintainable, which is always an important thing as we move forward. Something that we can reuse at a later time. So keep that in mind. It's completely optional, but your base project does support it now, so you can play with this and actually write some of your own Sass and use it in action in your own code. Now don't forget, when you do this, you do need to actually include it over here. So we would need to say sassstyle.css instead of index.css, or maybe in addition to if you wanted to have them both in there. And let's save this now. Be sure that it's using that other one. It is, and you'll notice all the styles are still exactly the same. That's what we'd expect. We can look at sassstyle.css and see that at this point, it's almost exactly the same as what we had written manually ourselves. But now we're generating it from the SCSS, which is a little more robust of a way to approach this.